Welcome to another episode of the Your Longevity Blueprint podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. NeilPaulvin, who has certifications in family medicine, osteopathic manipulation, and anti-aging and regenerative medicine. He practices in Manhattan, combining traditional and alternative medicine to help patients live a healthy lifestyle and perform their best. As a leading expert in biohacking and human optimization, Dr. Paulvin is recognized for his exceptional work applying a hyper-personal approach to help his patients, including Fortune 500 executives, Olympic athletes, and A-list celebrities. He helps them optimize their health, perform better under pressure, recover faster, and move beyond the baseline. Well, that sounds exciting. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Paulvin.
Thanks for having me again. Glad to be back.
So I first had you on season 1, and now I think it was season 1. It was early on, and now here we are in season 4. So thank you for coming back on. And I do want to, just for my listeners, encourage that they check out that episode. But first, let's kind of start with how you became such an expert. How did you become so interested in longevity and even peptides, which was kind of the topic of our past discussion?
They kind of all connect into one at this point. I got into peptides because I started off old. When I started out of residency, I was doing family medicine and sports medicine, and traditional things weren't helping. So that led to me to things like acupuncture, supplements, and peptides. And then peptides, when I got into them probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, well, probably 7 years ago at this point, they're associated with anti-aging, and then gone down the rabbit hole. And now aging and longevity, I think everybody from like Tony Robbins to Mark Hunt is talking about longevity at this point. It's kind of nobody wanted to talk about 5 years ago, and now it's like everywhere you go.
Totally. I secretly want to know everything you do to kind of biohack, but maybe we'll come back around to that at the end. So I guess we'll just get into it. How, for our listeners, can someone increase their longevity, aka their health span?
Yeah, so I want to. That's a good kind of way to start. In that, in most cases, we're talking health span at this point. Health span meaning that if you want to live the most healthy, optimized life, there's nothing yet. We're close. It's been proven in humans to elongate our lives. There's things that we think will help. So that's what kind of we'll be talking about.
Yeah. So tell us all those.
as we go along here, I just want to make I mean, in the way I present to people, and for people from beginners or people who come back with like 2 pounds of research and Andrew Huberman and Peter Attia quotes are, it starts with the foundation. It starts with exercise, sleep, diet, stress reduction, no matter what. I mean, that's something we can always hop on no matter what. And then
maybe we should break those down. But okay, you finish the and then we'll come back to those.
Yeah, and then you can kind of add more of the higher end stuff. I mean, again, you can definitely do things like sauna and hyperbaric, and take a couple supplements or peptides. And then you kind of, I call it juggling. I mean, it's you add a couple things, maybe take one thing away, and you kind of go and go and go. If you try to do 25 things at once, it's just gonna be totally unstable and pretty expensive, and you probably won't get anywhere, besides a little bit muddy. So it's kind of how we look at it. But it starts with, like you said, it starts with the foundational stuff with a couple supplements I usually recommend, and then we kind of go from there.
Well, let's break all those down. You said exercise, sleep, diet, and supplements. So let's go back to exercise.
Stress reduction.
Oh, stress reduction. Got it. Well, there's another one there then. Okay, so let's start with exercise.
I mean, exercise is the core of most things. We know, I mean, exercise is 2 parts. We know exercise is right now the best cure that we have, or best treatment we have for Alzheimer's disease. Exercise is one of the best things that you can do for your brain in general. Plus, we know how important muscle mass is in terms of health span and lifespan. We know people who have lower grip strength don't live as long. They may live as much as 10 years shorter than somebody who has the appropriate grip strength. So it's just important on that regard. And now where we're getting nerdy is we now know that you should be doing different types of exercise, 90 to 120 minutes of resistance exercise, in theory 30 to 60 minutes of zone 2, where you can exercise but you can have a conversation but still have a little slight exertion with that. And
how
then
often, when you're saying those time, like how frequently?
I mean, there's people who say up to 90 minutes. Most people can't
5 days a week, or like how often?
It's a time.
Okay.
Because people, I mean, there's people where now people sometimes will do 10-minute blasts all over the place. So it's more time than is days anymore.
Okay.
Because there's people who can work out 3 times a week, but they get 180 minutes in that period of time. So
okay.
We don't really go by days, we go by minutes or hours at this point, just because everybody's their own schedule at this point.
Kind of like for a toddler, when you just want them to eat the rainbow and get all their food in the week, not in the day. Kind of like the same is true with
Exactly. Yeah,
exercise. Just get it
exactly.
in the week. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not as rigid anymore.
Let me go back to grip strength. Do you measure that in your patients?
I've started to.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, most of my patients, or if they're coming to me, are pretty healthy to begin with usually.
Sure.
But it's kind of people with, especially the aging as it's going, or now that there's becoming more social media, people are becoming much more competitive, which is kind of fun and funny at the same time, where they want to know what the top score is, and are they much better than where everybody else is. So it's good for data points. It's good to explain. It's something that I could start that minute on, and also again, it's competitive. I'll come in 6 months and it'll be better next time.
I remember learning about that from my anti-aging boards, just how important grip strength was, but I've never actually utilized it in my clinic. But more lately, my 4-year-old has been obsessed with the strongman competitions. He loves watching those on TV. When they talk about, the guys who do like the log lift or whatever it's called, just how their grip strength has to be amazing. So I'm thinking, how do you improve your grip strength? Is it primarily lifting weights? I mean, is that what someone primarily would do?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be lifting weights specifically. People think it's a combination of, yeah, that if you're lifting weights, that your grip strength is going to get better. I mean, assuming you're doing upper body. But also people who are trying to improve grip strength, if you go hiking, or not hiking, but mountain climbing, or
Sure.
you can do monkey bars or any of those
Yeah,
other
yeah,
things, that's grip strength. That's not really lifting weights, but it's really making sure that, or some people actually just carry bags and try to carry as far as they can go. There's different ways people do it now.
sure.
But the data just keeps coming every day.
Gosh, that takes me back to my gymnastics days. Those rips on your hands and yeah. Okay, so
Yeah,
exercise exercise is important. Sleep. Let's go on to sleep. My patients are so concerned, as they should be, when they're tracking their sleep and they come in and they say, I'm only getting 10 or 20 minutes of deep sleep. And that's truly not enough. So in your opinion, how much should patients be going for? What's their goal between deep and REM or total? What do you want to see with your patients?
There's no what the data shows now is like 90, in theory, 90 minutes of both. We tell patients optimally a quarter of their sleep should be that. It just, again, we know that even the best wearable data is not perfect, and they think they've done tests where maybe like 60 to 80% accurate depending on the patient. So we take it with a grain of salt, but that's kind of what we're looking for. But it also depends on their whole, how many we're looking at, as that's part of the whole picture. I mean, like, again, are their numbers good? Are their testosterone good? Is the
Sure,
testosterone good? It's part of the picture, but that we look for those numbers optimally. It's kind of a lot of these things is, if patient's perfect, they have no complaints, their labs are really good, they have no fatigue, no brain fog, they're getting 70 minutes of deep sleep. We're not gonna be over, we work on it. We work more on lifestyle changes. But if they're tired, if they're coming in tired or
sure.
not fresh in the morning, we kind of do a deeper dive. Any of these numbers, a lot of them are not like rock hards. I mean, it's kind of, you got to combine the data with what patients are telling you, which is kind of the art of this.
And it's all kind of relative. It sounds like to their total sleep and whatnot. So I had heard you needed ideally an hour of deep, 2 hours of REM for 3 hours total would be beautiful. And I think not everybody can get that, but
Yeah,
that's
if some
what
people can get that, that's really darn
really
good.
good.
I
What
mean,
are
yeah,
your, I guess I may transition to supplements here for a second. What are some of your top supplements to help improve sleep? I want to go back to labs. Obviously, we want to optimize testosterone and we're going to go there. But on the sleep topic, how do you encourage patients work to improve their deep and REM sleep? And maybe what supplements do you use there too?
um, none of them are perfect. It's with sleep. I think sleep meds are some of the most overrated things out there at this, or supplements as well. I mean, again, I use the ones that are kind of commonly out there, mag 3 and 8. I
Yep.
use inositol. I use phosphatidylserine. I
Yep.
use glycine. I'm missing one. It'll come to me in a
Taurine, maybe.
second.
I don't know. I use a combo of
Yeah,
glycine, taurine, phosphatidylserine.
I'll
I mean,
use, yeah, I mean, sometimes, and I'll use very, very low dose melatonin if I have to. And also depends when they're not sleeping. Is it a problem that they can't fall asleep or they can't stay asleep, because there's different reasons for that.
sure.
Um, and then that's a part of it. A lot more of the time, it's more sleep hygiene than it is, or fixing the problem than it is, okay, you're going to go on mag 3 and 8 or whatever. But
Like
I
the
think,
stress, which is the next point we can talk about.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's, yeah, but it's a nice add-on. Some people do really great with them. Some people, it doesn't move the needle at all. Again, mag 3 and 8 probably has the most I've seen in terms of helping sleep, and there's some peptides that help. But again, getting people to sleep is probably the most variable thing of anything I can think of. Just what works for you is not working for your friend, is not working for your mother. It just doesn't. It's very individual.
Agreed. I love L-theanine. That's like my favorite supplement of all
Yeah.
time. Just it calms me down day, night, whatnot. But yeah, yes, it doesn't work for everyone. So I agree. Let's go on to diet. So what are your general recommendations? Just again, from a longevity standpoint, like how should your patients be eating? How are you coaching them in that regard?
Diet is one of those things where I used to be very specific, and now I've gotten much more broad because the data is saying that a lot of these diets, be it Mediterranean or uh, whatever, these heart healthy diets, or are all, they get you, will hopefully get you to the same point. So I really, the things we know that work for longevity specifically is caloric restriction. You obviously want to be 200 calories less in than out. We know that's linked to longevity. That's the easiest A to B.
Sure.
We know Mediterranean probably has the most data behind it in general in terms of heart healthy outcomes, which is obviously a big part of it. And also for the brain, you get a lot of the fish and everything you need that may optimize brain health. In the last couple of months, time restricted eating, which is different than fasting, has kind of trying to catch up here and has a lot of really good data coming out in terms of having really good both general health and longevity data. So that's meaning, again, usually most people are eating in a fixed window as opposed to a random window. That people, that's kind of what intermittent fasting is. And most people we tell if they eat from 8 to 4, that has the best data. Some people can do that, some people can't.
Say that again. So you're telling patients to eat from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Is that what
Give or
you're saying?
take, yeah, 8 to
Okay,
4,
yep.
9 to 5.
I like that because some of the guests I've had on in the past, they're saying the opposite and that they're saying eat later and omit breakfast. And I just feel like we need to be eating. I mean, I feel much better when I eat breakfast. And I've had a couple guests come on saying that's when you're most insulin sensitive. Like you should be eating in the morning to like fuel your day. So
Yeah,
I like that you're saying that instead of eating like 12 to 8
no,
or whatever, you're
it
saying 8
doesn't
to 4.
back it up as much because the insulin spikes, like you said.
Yeah.
You want to start with protein-rich meals as opposed to carb-rich meal optimally.
Yep.
And another thing we know is you want to be getting about 30 grams or more of protein in most of your meals. Not, and I don't believe it. So that's kind of what I give guidance on. More than, okay, I'm not a meal planner person. I will refer like to nutritionists, they want specific meals, but it really comes down to the calories, and the macros, especially the protein, than kind of anything else at this point. Is where we're going with this. A calorie is, I mean, it used to be a calorie is not a calorie. In most cases now, the data is showing a calorie is kind of a calorie in most cases. And I'll get a lot of yelling about that, but that's where the data kind of shows. It just, I mean, you can have 5 grams of sugar if you want to, but you just can't get addicted to and do it every day because there's other effects to it. But you're not going to gain more weight than somebody's having 5 calories of something of vegetables. As long as you're in a caloric restriction, you should hopefully be okay. But obviously, you want to eat the healthiest you can.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Let's go to stress. So what are some of, again, back to like how you guide or coach your patients, what are some recommendations for keeping stress down, managing, yes, our daily lifestyle?
I give different tips for people because there's different people that are they're going to do different things. I mean, I love breath work. I love meditation. I love yoga. There's some people who are just never going to do it. But again, so that's that I tell people to do. I have some people who will go for a walk. I tell people to get up in the morning and just get morning sun. Other people take a supplement for stress reduction, some
Yeah.
for the cortisol or GABA. I mean, again, there's different things out there. Again, it's something that that's something we can kind of tell by if you do either like a 24-hour cortisol or you just tell by somebody's heart rate variability, or if they have a sugar spike. A lot of different ways you can kind of figure it out. And then patients kind of know too when they know, again, is it in the morning when their kids are trying to get their kids off to school? Is it at night? Is it the middle of the day when work's overwhelming? And then you kind of find, okay, what can you do? I mean, some people do cold water immersion and calms themselves down. There's vagal nerve stim. Again, there's so many things that you can do, and it's kind of finding the right puzzle piece for people.
You got to personalize it and time it, and your intervention and whatnot. I hear you on that. Okay, let's go to supplements, and then we'll come back to blood tests. So, are there any maybe new supplements that can increase longevity? What are some of the popular ones that people are using now?
If we're talking just pure supplements now, the ones that people are really using are.
Or you can even go medications, peptides too. I mean, I'll leave this broad. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that are really kind of like top 4 or 5 now is something called urolithin A, which is from the gut bacteria, which, I mean, is exploded. Spermidine from wheat germ and other sources like natto and things like that has just huge amount of benefit. Taurine has a lot of benefits in terms of heart benefits, the stem cell regeneration and decreasing inflammation. New product that just kind of, again, I haven't seen a product like this take off in a while, something called Fatty 15.
I haven't heard of that. What is that?
Which is it's a 15, it's a fatty acid, a longer chain fatty acid than omega-3. And it just actually today, while we're filming this, came out with a study showing that it has almost potentially better anti-aging benefits than rapamycin. So
wow.
It's a preliminary small study, but it's something that, I mean, if we talk about sleep, I started taking it about a couple of weeks ago, and my deep sleep scores and the way I feel has gotten better. So
what's it called? Fatty what?
Fatty 15.
Fatty 15. And where do you get that? Like what brand?
It's proprietary to them right now.
Okay.
And they're just killing it. I mean, those, I'm trying to think what I'm missing. And then
do you take those? So back to putting you on the spot here. Do you take urolithin A? Do you take spermidine? Like Yep.
Yes, I take all the ones I mentioned, I take.
Okay. So fatty 15. Why don't we go rapamycin too? I don't want to cut you off if you had a train of thought there, but you mentioned this fatty 15 may actually outperform rapamycin. Can you mention what rapamycin is?
Yeah, rapamycin kind of came as an antifungal, and then it's a cancer immunosuppressant. Now it's become very popular as an anti-aging supplement. We're using it. It inhibits mTOR. It helps at the lower doses. Is it what we call an immunomodulator, where it can kind of reset your immune system, for lack of a better word. It decreases inflammation. I mean, and now they're using it now. There's studies going on in New York where I am looking at to slow down menopause, to using it for fertility. We're using it in patients with high cholesterol besides the anti-aging benefit. So,
but that's prescription, right? I mean,
you can get it compounded or a prescription. The prescription, it's a price question.
Sure. Okay. Any other supplements?
I mean, we can go on for days. Again, I have patients always ask me like my top 10. I mean, vitamin D is still an oldie but goodie that's not going to change. I don't know if I mentioned MitoQ, which is a form of CoQ10 that has the most data behind it. NAD in some form always is there. I don't know if I said alpha-ketoglutarate. That's something that has some benefit to it. It works on the mitochondria. For people who are doing their biological age test, it's been shown to decrease. And then probably TA65, which is a form of astragalus. I mean, that's a nice combo of some low-hanging fruit and some of the more complicated ones that are out there. I mean, the other two I'll throw in is acarbose, which is a diabetic medication, which has some really good data. And the new diabetic medications are going to something probably here in the future. Like Ozempic Mounjaro has some good anti-aging data, as well as the SGLT2 inhibitors, which are in the kidney, which a lot of people don't use yet because of their cost, but they're going to probably be the new one in the next year or so.
Good to know. You mentioned at the beginning there are some kind of also, I would say, more fun, I guess you would call them treatment options to increase longevity, kind of like red light therapy, hyperbaric, sauna, and whatnot. Can you dive into those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what I recommend, sauna has probably the most data behind it, and that's something that almost everybody can do. You can either have one at home, or everywhere now I think has a sauna facility near them at this point, and it just has benefits from decreasing inflammation to lowering blood pressure to helping potentially with Alzheimer's to just getting the toxins out.
Yeah.
You should be doing it for about 30 minutes. And then, I mean, we talk about the hyperbaric is great. Again, for brain health, inflammation, boosting stem cell production. It's something where you're in a high pressurized oxygen tube. It's more expensive, but it works. It's not something, also if you're claustrophobic, maybe not the best thing for you to be doing. And then those are kind of the two kind of, again, have the most data. Red light therapy is coming right behind. You can do in two, like a lot of different ways. The main two ways I recommend for people, if you're doing it for just general health, you can do either the panels or the wraps. You usually do it like 10 minutes, 5 times a week.
Are there certain companies that you really like? We haven't purchased one. I want to get a panel for our clinic. Do you have one at your clinic or at home for personal
I
use?
have like 4, and I'm probably gonna get more. We can use name brands on your.
Yes, yeah, yes.
I mean, there's a couple out there. I mean, there's Gemba Red is really good. Lightpath, which is a smaller company, is really good. I'm missing one. It'll come to me in a second.
I already forgot the companies I looked into. I know there's the Juve, but I don't know how you feel about that.
Probably they were the first to market. I don't recommend them for anybody unless they already
That's
have
good
it.
to know. Yeah.
They just, I think they're trying to revamp it because they got some negative recommendations behind it. BioLight Shop is pretty good. I mean, most of them are pretty good. You're just looking for lack of EMF, lack of leakage, and you want to make sure the power is variable because I mean you want a pretty powerful one, and also you want to look at the frequencies.
Sure.
Most of them, you also can get like a wrap, like Flex Beam is good. Give me one. Sorry. I told not to. Anyway, Flex Beam is a wrap, and then what we're using now is actually the cranial red light for patients for brain function, either to optimize function or just good data with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and patients and COVID and TBI and things like that. So
what brand is that, or what that one?
I mean, the best that has all the data right now is ViLight.
ViLight. Okay.
So it's in your nose, so you have to be okay with that. You look like Rudolph the Red.
Yeah.
I can't use it in the clinic for that reason because you can't really have people using the same thing people in their nose. There's also ironic for anybody who follows Brian Johnson, who's the multi-billionaire who's spending like $2 million a year, uses that one on his ads, which has good data behind it too.
Awesome. What's the deal with ice baths? You mentioned those, and one of my brothers has just kind of a homemade ice bath and tank outside, and he said that his deep sleep actually greatly improved after, because I feel like he does have a more stressed lifestyle, and I think it is something that does calm him down and help us sleep. So what are the other benefits? Ice baths are becoming just very popular. So why would someone consider doing that?
You hit on one already. It calms down your sympathetic nervous system. So you're going to hopefully get better sleep. It depends on, I find that it wakes me up. Just the cold will wake me up. I do feel calmer. And I do mine more earlier in the day because if I do it at night, I will not fall asleep. Other people say they sleep like a baby. It does decrease inflammation in some cases. It may help regulate the immune system. Some people think that it helps to regulate the neurotransmitters, things like serotonin and dopamine. It may whatchamacallit, and then also some people think, and there's some data behind it, again, cold that it may help boost testosterone levels. Kind of more anecdotal than, I mean, there's not a lot of great studies with it yet. I mean, some of the claims I see now, because there's, I mean, 13,000 companies out there are not really backed up by a lot of stuff yet. But it's helpful and it definitely works, and it's amazing. You can do it for free and or like $2 and go down 7-Eleven, put some ice in your bathtub, or you can buy one that's $30,000. I mean, it's just amazing. And people will give you different answers why they choose it.
Sure. Okay, let me go back to labs. So what blood tests do you routinely recommend for your patients to get done kind of we'll just say as a new patient to kind of check their overall health, kind of screen them? I do want to go into, fancy like image testing, but just from a serum, like blood standpoint, what labs do you get on your patients? Yeah. From a longevity standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I order obviously more than probably most. I mean, the basic ones are obviously we're looking at, the different ones we're looking at the sugar levels. What I mean by that is a hemoglobin A1C. We're looking at a fasting insulin. Um, we're looking at with new data, newer test, I guess, called the HOMA IR, which looks at insulin resistance. We're looking at the newer cholesterol panels. If your doc's doing just like an LDL and an HDL, that's not really what we're looking at anymore. It's helpful, but we're looking more at apolipoprotein B. We're looking at the oxidized LDL. We're looking at particle number, particle size. I think lipoprotein A, things like that. And it's a big picture now, as opposed to just looking at total cholesterol. That's probably the thing that's morphed the most in the last like year or so.
Sure.
I'm trying to think specifically aging. Otherwise, we're looking at the female male hormones. Just I don't know if we want to go through all of that specifically, but I do it starting in their 20s. That's probably in terms of anti-aging specific. The couple newer ones, we look at uric acid. We look at whatchamacallit. One that
inflammatory markers. You check inflammatory.
Yeah, I do see a high sensitive CRP. We look at cystatin C, which is a evaluation of the kidneys, and now they think maybe potentially the brain as well. Pregnenolone. Those are kind of the basic labs that we're looking at for patients in terms of aging.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what we check. So you're basically you're looking for insulin resistance, running a more advanced cardiovascular panel to assess risk, doing hormones, looking at inflammation. So that makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of the basics.
Sure.
We can go down you can do a deeper dive with anything now at this point. So
wonderful. Well, moving forward, I saw a post that you had on Instagram about additional screening options for longevity. And I have my patients ask me about these, but you spoke just so much better about them. I thought, oh my gosh, I got to bring him back to talk about all of these. So I want to break down first this new full body. Well, maybe it's not that new, but pretty new to me, the full body MRI called the Prenuvo, if I'm pronouncing that right. I actually was wondering if you've had it done yourself, and just kind of to explain to the listeners what that is. And then we'll kind of go through lots of other things in any particular order, the Cleerly Galleri testing, which we do offer our patients here. I was going to ask if you actually do circulating tumor cell testings. We'll talk about EndoPAT, VO2 Max, biological age testing. I want to get into all of this, but let's start with the full body MRI. So if you could tell us kind of pros and cons, what it is, if you've had it done, general price, that would be great.
Yeah, the full body MRI, I've had it done. I was one of the first here in New York to do it. It's, if you know what you're getting into, I recommend it to everybody, meaning three things. Meaning A, I'm kind of jumping to the middle, but A, that you're going to be in a tube for 90 minutes, really know to move. So patients who are claustrophobic, maybe not the test for you. B, the full tests are going to run you anywhere between $25,000 and $3,000. So if that's burdensome, don't do it. And then the big piece, which has become the big talking point, is like any test, you may find something that unfortunately is positive, and you may find something you didn't know about, and you have to be able to cope with that information.
Incidental findings. What are you going to do about these? Yeah.
And there's patients who just may find incidental finding that's a false positive, which you can do with any test. You can get a chest X-ray and have a false positive, so that's part of it. But it's also the other part where some people just don't want to know. I had that issue with one test we did about Alzheimer's lab work, like ApoE4. People would listen to Chris Hemsworth, who's positive for that. Some people just don't want to know, and they don't want the emotional burden of it. That's probably the biggest concern of it.
Because this is looking for tumors, like this is looking for cancer, right? This is looking for any structural like abnormalities, head to toe.
It's scanning abnormalities. They'll look at your spine. They're working on some heart things. They can see an aneurysm in the brain or the heart to some degree. So it does a lot of. It's the most multifunctional test out there. Is it perfect? No. Are they still working out the bugs? Yes. It's changed even like the 6 months since I had it done. I had it done like in the springtime. And now it's almost winter already. But again, if you know what you're going for, do it. Don't do it because she's Kim Kardashian or your favorite celebrity promoting on Instagram, which has become part of the other issue with it. People don't know what it is, and so-and-so is doing it, I'm going to do it.
So if they don't find anything significant, like what, and you have a routine good bill of health, when is it recommended to be repeated?
They
Like
recommend every 2 years now.
2 years. Okay.
Some people say a year, some say two. I mean, honestly, two is with the general bill, good bit of health is fine.
Sure. Okay. What about the Cleerly? I actually hadn't heard of this.
Yeah,
And
Cleerly is gaining more and more popularity very quickly. Um, it's a test that we're able to do a CAT scan of the coronary arteries. We slow the heart down to look at soft plaque, which we now know when you have plaque, you have soft and hard plaque to keep it simple. Soft, we're worried more about some plaque kind of breaking off. Hard plaque's not as likely to do that. It's kind of, if you think of visually, that kind of makes sense. It also is able to tell how much what the percentage of blockage is in all the arteries that you having to go through what's called the catheterization, where they stick a little scope in your groin usually or other area, and they take a tour through your arteries. This is non-invasive, and it's able to give us a little more data. It's a little more advanced version of what people call a calcium scoring, which for most people is a good assessment of risk. We know people who do get a low score or zero score and maybe a 5 to 10% chance of having some type of coronary event. I tend to order it more for patients, either patients who want everything and don't care, or patients who have either huge family history and some abnormal of the heart labs that we talked about before. It's not usually covered by insurance yet. I think that's going to change pretty shortly. It's very hard to find right now if you're not in a major area. I have patients who are like, I'm so-and-so. I'm like, you have to travel 150 miles to get it. I mean, it's the same with the full body MRI at this point.
Yeah.
I think if you're not in a major city or major area, a suburban area, I mean, some of these tests are just really hard to get right now.
Sure.
I think it's going to change in the next couple of years because, as we said, things are growing exponentially at this point. But yeah, it's something that for patients who either have huge family history and or abnormal labs is something I recommend.
Like I have patients who have significant family history of pancreatic cancer, right? So they're asking, what can I do? Like, and we can, the Galleri test actually is a great test for them too. And we'll get to that next, but doing something like the Prenuvo makes sense. That's radiation free. Sounds like the Cleerly has radiation though.
It's a CAT scan, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not a lot compared to what it's doing. It's very minimal, and you can, again, if you're radiation phobic, I don't know what the word is. I mean, there's detox things that you can do. It's something you can do a calcium scoring, which is still, I mean, there are other tests you can do that are not, that you can do a catheterization if you had to, but then they're giving that, again, there's no perfect answer. It's people have to make that own decision with anything in their life of what the boundaries are. But yeah, that's what's great about the Prenuvo or the full body MRIs is that there's no radiation.
Do you happen to know what the Cleerly costs approximately?
Depends on the facility. It's usually in the mid, like between 12 and 2,000.
Sure.
Usually closer to like 12 or 1,400 I'm seeing now, but
Okay.
I'm also in Manhattan, the most expensive big place in the country. So
What about benefits of a DEXA scan? Like what all can a DEXA scan tell us?
I mean, DEXA of all the tests that are out there and kind of that advanced aging testing probably is by far number one right now. One, because it's cheap, even if you're paying out of pocket for it, and it gives you so much information that's affected just general health and longevity. It's the most A to B to C. For women and some men, it does give us know what the quality of the bone, the risk for osteoporosis. I mean, we know the risk of when you have even osteopenia, the risk of early mortality is pretty high, worse when you have osteoporosis. And then we're also able to look at muscle mass. We know there's a link between muscle, and general health and longevity. So, and then the last thing we have to look at is visceral fat, which is the fat wrapped around your organs. So I explain to people, and that's been linked to obesity, Alzheimer's, heart disease, if you have a high percentage of that. And then we can look at just general fat throughout the body, and so it's, again, it gives us kind of a short-term picture as well as a long-term picture. It's non-invasive, no radiation. It takes about 8 minutes to do. I mean, so it's a win-win all over the place.
Pretty convenient. Yep. Speaking of fat, do you offer like in-body scans at your practice? Do you have any of
No,
those
because we
sort
do
of
the DEXA.
Because you do that. Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, the studies now show that DEXA is better than in-bodies and all those
Yeah.
other types. But they're great. What I tell people with those, it's great to gauge if you don't have access to a DEXA, because even in Manhattan, I mean, there's maybe 2 facilities in the city who do it right now. I mean, again, that's all these are going to change soon, but it's great. The numbers themselves are usually off by about 10%, what I'm finding. So if your in-body is saying you're 15%, it's probably 25. They're
Mhm.
not, they're
InBody's
well,
just cheaper and convenient because we have one in our office, but yeah.
yeah,
But I understand the
well,
DEXA is better. Yeah.
yeah, and also it's a great percent. If it's still, if you're 15% in today, and then 3 months from now you're at 12%, that progression is not wrong. So it's a way of judging how well people are
Sure.
doing.
Sure.
But in terms of specific numbers, I
Could be
mean,
variable.
yeah.
Sure. Okay, let's go on to the Galleri cancer screening. Is that something that you've used with your patients?
I do. It's it ebbs and flows. Um, it has again. I think partial. I was just actually talking with another doctor today. There's it's kind of now since the full body MRIs have become more popular. Some people only want to do one or the other. Gallery is and the data is showing that it's better for later stage cancers and
Mm-hmm.
earlier stage cancers.
Yep.
So the
And
question,
certain cancers versus others,
yeah,
period.
so
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
yep.
again, it's not perfect. At least with a full body MRI, if it's there, it's probably there's something there. Um, it's a nice it's an add-on. The way I view it, like I said, I'd rather have somebody do the full body MRI if they can afford it. It's again to do completely, you do both. I mean, you do Gallery and the
Sure.
Pinocchio with those same caveats. You may have a false positive, you may have a false negative. Again, are not as great for early stage, and patients who, again, patients make that decision what they prefer to do. With that understanding, I mean, I'm ordering less and less, I'll admit, just mostly because of the full body MRIs have kind of, they just prefer to do one versus both. Some people, because otherwise you're spending $4,000 to $5,000, which most people aren't spending right now.
Yeah,
But
I agree, but you live in Manhattan and I'm in Iowa, and I don't know if anywhere in the state even offers a Prenuvo. Probably not. So the
no,
Gallery
you're probably going to
is,
Minnesota
yeah,
or Texas.
yeah, yeah. So the Gallery test is about $1,000, give or take. And so I do have some patients who have done that. And again, back to patients who have the strong family history, who are of more advanced age, those at a higher risk for cancer. And we have a breakdown of which cancers that's best for and which cancers it's not the best for. So that's kind of how we use that. I do want to ask about circulating tumor cell testing, though. I don't know if you even see patients with cancer, but
Not as a primary reason for me to see them.
yep, yep,
I'll give them advice.
sure.
Um, the things that are out there, I don't. If you're seeing somebody either traditionally or non-traditionally for cancer, that you should be doing a lot of it, and it's just not something that
Yeah,
I give
yeah.
recommendations. But yeah,
I was just going to ask if you ever have run circulating tumor cell testing. I don't know if
I
that's
did it
something.
once.
Yeah,
It's not something I use often again because I have the other things available to me. I think there's some newer tests that are coming, liquid biopsy, things like that, that I think are going to be ready for prime time early next year or by the end of next year. But I just don't do it that much. It doesn't
yeah.
that
Well, yeah,
much.
we see very few cancer patients. I mean, that's not, I mean, we're primarily seeing patients like you. They want to optimize they want to live a long, healthy life. And we see a lot of women going through perimenopause, menopause, whatnot. So we're optimizing their hormones. But for the patients who do have cancer, we do use circulating tumor cell testing. Just for the listeners, real quick, this is great to see if essentially the tumor is shedding, aka also metastasizing. So it is a great test to measure really accuracy of the current treatment to see if your treatment's working or if you need to pivot and do something more aggressive. So that is something that we offer here. Moving right along. What about EndoPAT?
I
Do
mean, yeah,
you?
yeah. So these are tests that are looking at like the vessels themselves at this point. They're really hard to find. They do give us really good data. We know that both blockage and endothelial health, which is the way the blood vessel contracts, are really important. And it's something that we offer patients. That's even in New York City is hard to find. At this point, I've actually had a couple patients do a doctor. There's a lot of them in where is he? I think he's in Illinois. An actual fly out there and have him do the whole thing because that's what he does. But it's endothelial health. Other are going to things that you're going to hear about more. Because endothelial health is going to we know that it can lead to high blood pressure, can lead to heart attack. Again, people probably have heard the terms and we know even
Leaky vessel or
leaky vessels, and also think the terms like zombie cells or senescence are affecting the blood vessel, and inflammaging, all these new cool terms that people never knew 2 years ago, and now they're talking about like they're common, but I mean they are common, but like they're more common terms now. So it's endothelial. It's something we do check, especially in our patients who have a lot of vascular history, or the patients who just want every test done. There's now a cousin talking to some interventional and integrative cardiologists called the glycocheck, which actually they think may actually be better.
Is
Again,
that looking at the glycocalyx matrix or whatever? I mean, is that what
exactly,
that's looking at? Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
The glycocalyx, which is becoming more and more important in terms
Which
of.
I think all these tests sound amazing, but again, I keep coming back to, so like for my dad, we don't have access. Well, I mean, maybe we do, and we were unaware of where we would get this sort of testing done, but I just put him on, like, I don't know if you use Artericell or some other company,
Yeah, there's
but that's
two.
supposed to,
Mhm.
it's supposed to fix, well, not fix. Well, no, it is supposed to kind of
It helps.
regrow,
It helps. It
help
helps.
that matrix to minimize leaky vessels. So I just said, Dad, you need to take this. So do you use those supplements in your patients?
I do. Um, it's what was I gonna say? I do use them. It's what I found with those supplements, and I kind of get it, that the patients don't know what they are. Like patients will come in asking for spermidine or some of the other ones because they know about them. The cardiologists have no idea what they are, and 99%. Like if you talk about CoQ10 or whatever, they know what it is. So it's a lot of education. They work. It's that area now where I think it's just tougher. Again, they know supplements for a lot of other stuff. That's just one where it's like a lot of education.
I agree. It does. Yeah, you do have to provide a lot of education, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't use it. And that, like,
No, I know
my dad's a
it
very
worked.
healthy guy too. I think he has high cardiovascular risk, but I thought it's not going to hurt for you to take this. The research at least had shown in like 90 days or whatnot, it could restore that matrix. So I'm like, hey, take a couple bottles worth and take a break. Maybe do that once a year.
No, it does work.
Yeah.
It definitely can help. Um, it's just again, it's I give it to my patient of high cholesterol and other or family
Yeah.
history.
It's hard to prioritize when there's like, 20 things, 50 things that everyone should be taking. It's hard to
Exactly.
prioritize.
Exactly.
Where you spend your money. Yeah. Okay, let's spend some time on VO2 max testing, like what this is, how it's measured. Again, when I took my anti-aging boards, I remember this being on there is just so important, but it's not something that I'm currently measuring with my patients. So kind of tell me how you use this.
Yeah, we know VO2 max is associated with longevity and general health. It also, again, partly is going to be how much exercise you're doing, which is healthy in general. It's the maximum amount of oxygen you're able to take in during exercise. It's measured usually on a treadmill, can be done on a bike. It's done. There's usually have this weird kind of like Star Wars looking mask that's on there to check those levels for you. And they're doing is they're checking over a period of time to your max exertion where you can't go anymore. And then there are set variables for your age, which again, people are competitive. They want to get there or meet their level, if not higher. It could combine with other things like a resting metabolic rate, which is the way you kind of, or your metabolism. People that should be done in the morning. You can't have caffeine with it. The one I use, the person I use now here in Manhattan also will do, and it's becoming more and more, and we've talked about it very briefly, is you can figure out some cases, you figure out where your zones are, where my zone 2 of exercise, where a certain heart rate is and other variables is not where your zone 2 is, where not where my zone 4 is. Again, so you can figure out where your zones are by doing this test, and more people are trying to hit certain zones while they exercise. And
Like
then also,
zones that you can utilize to improve your VO2 max, or
well, no,
what?
just zones
Just
in general. It's a percent. A lot of it's percentage of heart rate, your max heart rate. Like I think they people have different zone, but zone 2 is like 65% of max heart rate.
okay.
Zone 5 is like 85 to 90% of your max heart rate, plus with other some things kind of mixed in there. And then people are actually checking what's called a lactate threshold, where your body starts making lactate, which is a breakdown product, which we used to think was bad and caused all the pain, which now is not true. That lactate now actually may be good for us and activate the mitochondria, but it's a whole other conversation. But we can tell again how our training is, but where that zone is. So it's telling us a lot. Just about our overall health, and for people who are trying to maximize their exercise performance, to maximize their health, it hits it on 2 or 3 different angles. You want to work with somebody in a perfect world that really knows how to interpret those results, like some type of sports physiologist. In Manhattan, there's facilities that do it. If you're not in a major area, most hospitals will have a sports performance lab. or actually a lot of if you're in a college town, like a Division I college will have this testing. A lot of times they'll do it through the training staff there. So it's accessible, but you want to know somebody who can explain to you,
interpret it. Yeah. And then what do you
give
do
you a
about it?
plan.
Like, yeah, I was gonna say, so who comes up with the plan to improve? Let's say you're
Usually again, there's certain people who just do it and tell you what the results are. The good trainers or the sports physiologists will know, okay, your VO2 max is not normal, you do the A, B, and C, or no matter what, we know now it's high intensity interval training is the best way to do it. Usually they call it 4x4s, doing 4 minutes as hard as you can, usually either on a bike or running on a treadmill 4 times. That's the simple way to tell people. There's different, again, depending on higher level athletes are doing different things. You can do what's called the Carol bike, which is a biohacking tool where you're riding on this bike and they tell you you're being chased by tigers and you just go all out for 6 minutes, but it improves your VO2 max. There's other things you can do with people who run with the masks on and things like that. But the simplest way is what we call it the 4x4.
so if someone is training or just living at higher altitude, are they automatically going to have a better VO2 max or not necessarily?
They have better oxygen capacity, not necessarily they could have,
Or like a swimmer
go
with large
longer.
lungs.
They would have more endurance, not necessarily enough VO2 max, not automatically an direct overlap. I was actually talking to the person who does my VO2 maxes, because the study just came out of people training at high altitude, and they have more oxygen because their red blood cells can carry more oxygen. And now a new therapy is either hyperoxygen training or low oxygen training to maximize that. But that takes weeks, and that's a kind of a different mechanism. But it's something that does exist, and people are using it. That's why, I mean, people like the Olympic training center has always been like in Colorado because of the high altitude. So it helps them be able to do that, especially endurance, like marathoners, swimmers, like you said, you mentioned exactly their lung capacity and their ability to carry oxygen underwater.
Sure.
So
Interesting.
that field is going to be insanely growing in the next 2 years. We have these little patches that measure everything.
Yeah, I bet. All right. What about biologic age testing? I think we talked about this on the first podcast I had you on, but which companies are you using now? Are you pleased with them? Kind of tell us about that.
I'm definitely more pleased now than I was. I mean, it's really in the last 3 months or so kind of exploded. Is a measure of epigenetics where you're going to get an age, and that biological age is different than your chronological age, which is the age on the calendar. Sometimes you're lower, sometimes younger, sometimes you're older. They know that part is not what I use it for as much anymore. It's a nice guideline, but I don't know, people who like there's certain high-end researchers who have done multiple age tests and they get totally different answers. Some say they're younger, some say they're older. So they're and even Dr. Morgan Levine is probably one of the biggest pioneers of the clocks. He says they're not ready for prime time in terms of that age itself. But we now know it could be used kind of like we talked about body fat on like an in-body, is that we now know that patients who smoke or drink alcohol will have that'll make their biological age worse. So we can say, hey, why don't you stop smoking for 6 months, and then let's check your biological age. So we can use it as a guide. We know there's a link now that biological age and psychological issues, depression, anxiety, bipolar, linked to diabetes. So we're using it more as kind of a guide to how people are doing, and the age is kind of a cool secondary for the way I look at it, as opposed to, okay, I'm 45 years old, my biological age is 32, I'm a superstar. That's still not, it's good to know, but it's really going to be the down and dirty data. A company called True Diagnostics, just kind of pushing the boundaries more than anybody else is, had just partnered with Harvard, where now they can link it to your fitness, to your VO2 max, they can link it to your lung health. I mean, that's where we're going, where you're going to have an organ age for everything. You're going to have a heart age, you're going to have a skin age, you're going to have a brain age, you're going to have a liver age. Hopefully within a year or two, that's what we're going to be, again, more important, because if your liver age is really bad, then yeah, you got to do stuff for your liver or your heart or your kidney, or again, whatever it happens to be. as opposed to just a general, again, it's like an inflammatory marker. It's great that your inflammation's high, but if you don't know where it's coming from, it's only half the battle.
Sure. And I assume all those things we opened the podcast with when I was asking, what are general tips for, longevity, back to exercise and sleep and diet and managing stress, right? And supplements. I mean, I mentioned all those things can impact the biological age.
Not as actually we know alcohol, alcohol and
strong.
smoking are bad.
Sure.
Marijuana, no real effect on it. Again, marijuana is a whole conversation. If you think it's good or bad, that's a whole other conversation. But that has no effect on your biological age. So it's not
it'll raise your estrogen, men. Okay, never.
Yeah, it's not always A to B. They're trying to figure out now things again. Most diets do not affect your biological age. Fasting does improve caloric restriction, which I talked about, is one of the things that does improve your biological age. So it's kind of a fun puzzle to put together right now, and that's what we're doing.
So, I'm just curious to know how you see patients in your practice. Like, do you see patients who are coming in with complaints, or do you see patients that are coming in saying, I'm 60, I want to live till I'm 100, what can you do for me?
It's 50-50, and there's some overlap there. I mean, hey, I have a family history of heart disease, or I have hypertension, but I want to live to 100. So I don't see as many complex medical patients as I used to, but I still see both.
Lucky you, they're hard. Yeah, no, because we see a lot of patients, who are coming in with, 30 chief complaints. It's like, oh my gosh, we're literally working through every organ system and, adding on some of this longevity testing on top of it. It's a lot. So I feel like, I think back to, even for some of my listeners, I think just building that healthy foundation is crucial first and kind of regaining health before we then add on all these things for longevity. But it's all exciting and fun to talk about.
Yeah, it's about reading. I've learned to, and a lot of it's like reading the patient. I mean, there's patients, they're going to do two things and that's it. And you pick, again, you said the two that are going to give them the biggest bang for the buck. There's other patients who just want to do everything. And you kind of,
totally,
you got to read the patient.
Yep, totally. Okay, so let's go back to kind of what biohacking tools you personally use. I mean, we've talked about a lot today. Is there anything else you want to share that you think is really crucial to longevity and biohacking that we didn't mention on the show, or maybe that you personally use?
Let's see. We talked about, like I said, we talked about a lot. Trying to think. In terms of a supplement that I use, is a product called Prodrome, which is plasmalogens, which has huge benefits in terms of general health. In terms of we're using it not with our brain illness, I don't like Alzheimer's or traumatic brain injury type patient. We're using long COVID, so it's nice. It's on both. So that in terms of supplement, that's probably the one that we didn't really hit on at all. That I use all the time. I'm trying to think of. I mean, I love when peptides, we really didn't go into. In terms of like biohacking tools that were not talked about, the red light I mentioned really, really briefly. I'm now playing with a vagal nerve stimulator, which looks like a massage gun. I just bought a product called Hulist. There's a couple good ones out there. They all work a little differently. They have getting some good data behind them. Just again, it's something that can calm your parasympathetic to kind of balance with your sympathetic nervous system. Same with this cold plunge or anything else. And I'm trying to think, that's kind of, and then I'm also loving the what's it called? Neurofeedback helmets. The new one that just came out that I got to play with last week, that called Sensei. And the last thing we didn't mention, that kind of a test that people should try to get done. It's really hard to find. It's called the QEEG, which is really good for people to at least get a general assessment of their brain function. And then the reason I bring that up is the treatment for the problems is usually neurofeedback. So that's kind of what I'm playing with. And then, like I said, I love the name in the product. Fatty 15 is like, my friend introduced me to it, and I've never had a product that I felt like, maybe besides the BBC 157, where like a week later, and I just love it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, tell us, where can listeners find you? You already said you're from Manhattan, but what's the name of your practice and where are you on social media?
Right now it's Dr. Paulvin. We're probably going to be changing it soon. I am And they can find me at Dr. Paulvin, Doctor spelled out, DOCTOR Paulvin.com. And then the other ways they really get information, if you go to the website, you can sign up for the newsletter, or I do most of my stuff on Instagram, where I kind of do an IG Live once a week and put the most informational posts out there.
Wonderful. Okay. I don't remember what you said last time, but I'm going to ask you again. What's your top longevity tip out of everything you've shared today? If you had to pick one, what's your top tip?
And right, it's probably changed since the first time, because I feel it's really getting the 180 minutes, 120 to 180 minutes of exercise a week, and doing the different pieces of it, doing the zone 2, doing the weightlifting, doing the cardio, getting the data to map it out. Because if you don't have any data kind of where you are, it's kind of half the battle. But that's all the tech stuff is fun, but it works well. Well, now that I know what I'm doing, which sounds kind of funny saying that, but
exercise. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks again for coming on the show and sharing how you work with your patients to increase their longevity. And thank you for sharing new progressive testing options available. This was great. This is what I wanted to hear. I enjoy following you on Instagram, and I hope my listeners do the same, I guess. So thank you for coming on the show.
thanks for having me. It was fun.